The Legend of Zelda, Nintendo's Golden Goose franchise. Created by legendary video game designer Shigeru Miyamoto, the game series currently has 19 main entries, but it all started in 1986 with the release of the original Legend of Zelda on the Famicom. Since 1986, however, the Zelda series has expanded beyond just the video games into other mediums such as cartoons and, for today's video, manga. Today we're going to be reviewing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past by mangaka Shotaro Ishinomori. Before we get into the review, however, I want to talk about the history of this manga and give a brief introduction into the others that came before it. The manga began serialization in the January 1992 issue of Nintendo Power and continued on to the December issue of that same year. I read the manga through the 2015 Viz Media edition. The artist and writer of the series is legendary mangaka Shotaro Ishinomori, born January 25th, 1938 in Tome, Japan. Oh, and while I was doing research about the author, I found that the city of Tome has a mascot. You probably already know that Japan has a really big mascot culture over there. And so the city of Tome has a mascot. Its name is Hatton. And it is, I kid you not, supposed to be a bowl of spilled soup. Now, Ishinomori is an artist who deserves a video of his own. That I will do sometime, someday, eventually. But in brief, he was a very prolific manga artist that created such legendary titles like Cyborg 009, Super Sentai, which would go on to be adapted into Power Rangers, and more. Now, this isn't actually the first time that an entry in the Zelda series has been adapted into a manga. In doing research about previous manga series, I've uncovered at least 5 different series that came before this one. Now, bear with me for a second, because it is about to get complicated. I found that the first time a Zelda game was adapted into a manga was in 1986. The title was simply The Legend of Zelda by artist Maru Ran, and it was based off the first game in the Zelda series. Now, I wasn't able to find much information on this title. It's never been officially translated into English, though there are some fan translations out there. And I wasn't even able to find much about the artist. If you're interested into looking more into this particular title, then I'll direct you to this video made by GTV Japan. This is a fan dub, so feel free to go and watch it. After you're done with this video, please stay. This wasn't the only Zelda manga by Maru Ran I found, however. They did another one called The Adventure of Link. This manga, however, was just as mysterious as the first, and I found even less information on it. From what I've gathered, it was either published in 87 or 88, and it was based off the second game in the series. The Adventure of Link, released for the Famicom Disk System in 1987. Those weren't the only 2 manga I found, however, that were based off the first 2 games. There are 2 more also called The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link, both by an artist named Mishouzaki. I totally butchered that name. Anyway, the first title was published in 1989 and the second in 1991. Again, I wasn't able to find much information on these, nor much information about the artist, but there are fan translations out there, so feel free to seek them out if you want. Over here in North America, in 1990, Valiant Comics, as part of their Nintendo Comic System series, published a Zelda comic written by George Caragon. There were 6 issues released, and this comic was based more on the cartoon than the video games. Okay, so moving away from that mess as fast as possible, we could get into the actual review. Based on the third game in the series, the manga does diverge pretty heavily from the game, but this video isn't going to be about comparing and contrasting the differences. With no spoilers, the plot starts on a stormy night, with our main protagonist, Link, waking up to the sound of Princess Zelda telepathically speaking to him from the depths of the Hyrule dungeon. Upon entering the dungeons, he finds his uncle is already there, in a clash with the wizard Agnem. His uncle loses, but Link must continue onward. Upon rescuing Zelda, he is told that the evil Ganon is planning to escape his realm of the Dark World in order to conquer Hyrule in the Light World. Link must now set out to find 3 powerful pendants in order to get the Master Sword to defeat Agnem and then Ganon. Link gathers these pendants and the Master Sword, confronting Agnem, defeating him, but with his dying words, he casts Link into the Dark World along with Zelda, who is snatched away from Link. In the Dark World, Link must now go and find Zelda before defeating Ganon in the final showdown. So, what did I think of the manga? Well, starting with the art, I really liked it. Where it truly shines, however, is in the larger half-page and near full-page panels littered about the manga. They really allow the art to stretch its legs, so to say, and really shows off just how much of a master Ishinomori is. The panel layouts in this manga is also extremely dynamic and very action-oriented. There is a lot of movement shown in the art, and the layouts are varied, taking on more interesting shapes. It allows the reader to truly get a sense of the action. Now, here's a first for me. As you may have already noticed, this manga is fully colored, as opposed to the standard mostly monochrome pages. The coloring of this manga is sublime. I found it to be very rich and vibrant. I mean, just look at the colors and detail on this page. And the use of color on this page of the Palace of Darkness exploding? My goodness. My final words about the coloring is that I found it to be overall quite charming and fitting for a Zelda comic. As for the story, it's the standard hero rescues the princess, but that's just what the Zelda series is like. It's still enjoyable. The story does have its quirks at times. First of all, the manga sometimes goes for like a comedic tone, which is alright. It doesn't distract from the story too much, but it can feel a little out of place. Also, there are some moments in the manga that were questionable, such as this scene with the hot air balloon. I found it to be pretty pointless and unlike something that I would find in a Zelda manga. Though maybe it's not as far-fetched of an idea as I think. I mean, for God's sake, spirit tracks exist. Also, this panel of Link.
He's flipping the bird. He's giving the finger.
Now, the fights were serviceable in the manga, though many felt a bit dissatisfying in how they were resolved. Fights such as the ones with the Cyclops and Minotaur-looking enemies felt a little cheap in the way they ended. It just sort of felt like pure luck and not necessarily clever tactics. Or skill. Same with the Ganon fight. I won't spoil it, but to me it felt pretty anticlimactic. The fight itself only lasted about 5 pages or so, and felt weak compared to how epic it should have been for the final showdown. Finally, there's the character of Rome. He just kind of shows up in Chapter 8, fights Link for a bit, then doesn't show up again until Chapter 10, just to save Link. His character felt pretty out of place, and unnecessary as a whole. I believe he might have been an attempt to provide Link with a sort of adversary in the Dark World, but his character is just not well established enough to have any real impact in the story. Though he does become somewhat crucial at the end in the fight with Ganon, but it was in a very roundabout way. Overall, The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past was a pretty good short read, though it may be more for Zelda fans than fans of fantasy manga in general. For any Zelda fan, this is very much worth your time. Outside of that, you can't really go wrong with this. I would recommend this work if you want a short, easy to read, colorful, and action packed fantasy manga. That's why I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And there it is. That is my review of The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past by Shotaro Ishinomori. You can't really go wrong with this manga. It was short, well drawn, very colorful. It was just enjoyable overall. I hope you agreed with what I had to say about this manga, and I hope to see you next time.